Evening didn't rush into Willow Lane. It never did. It arrived the way a deep breath arrives, gently, naturally, without asking for attention. The sky above the lane shifted slowly from pale blue to a softer shade, then deeper still, until it became the calm color of twilight. The kind of sky that feels wide and comforting, as if it's holding the world rather than hanging above it. The houses along Willow Lane stood quietly in a neat row, each one familiar, each one settled. Their roofs caught the last bit of daylight, while their windows reflected the fading glow like memories being put away for the night. Nothing needed to happen. Nothing was expected. The street itself seemed to understand that this was the hour for slowing down. A light breeze moved through the tall maple trees lining the sidewalks. Their leaves whispered softly, not loudly, not urgently, just enough to remind the air that movement still existed. The sound was steady and soothing, like the hush of distant waves or the gentle brushing of fabric. Somewhere down the lane a screen door closed softly, not slammed, not hurried, just closed. The sound blended into the evening and disappeared. Porch lights began to turn on, one by one, not all at once. Each light waited for its moment, as if listening to the rhythm of the street before deciding it was time. A warm yellow glow spilled onto wooden steps. A soft white light settled near a mailbox. A small lantern flickered near a garden fence. Each light felt like a quiet reassurance. The sidewalks were empty now. No footsteps echoed. No voices called out. The day had finished what it needed to do, and Willow Lane was ready to rest. If you were walking here, you might slow your pace without even realizing it. Your shoulders would loosen, your breathing would deepen, your thoughts would begin to drift, because Willow Lane had a way of inviting stillness, and tonight it held that invitation gently. At the far end of Willow Lane stood a pale green house with white trim and a porch that wrapped gently around the front. The wood creaked slightly when stepped on, not in complaint, but in recognition. Mrs. Eleanor Finch stood there now. She moved slowly, not because she had to, but because she preferred to. A soft knitted shawl rested over her shoulders, worn thin from years of use and care. The air was cool, but comfortable, the kind of cool that feels refreshing rather than sharp. Eleanor had lived on Willow Lane longer than most could remember, long enough to watch trees grow tall, long enough to see families arrive, leave, and sometimes return, long enough to know that streets, like people, develop a rhythm of their own. She reached for the porch light switch and paused, as she always did. This pause mattered to her. It was her way of listening. The street was quiet now, not empty, just calm. The leaves whispered. Somewhere a distant dog barked once, then settled again. The world felt balanced. Eleanor flipped the switch. The porch light glowed warmly, spreading its gentle circle across the steps and down toward the roses growing beside the railing. The petals looked almost golden under the light,
as if the evening itself had decided to linger there. She smiled, not a big smile, just a small one, the kind that comes from familiarity. Eleanor remembered other evenings on this porch, sitting in the same chair, holding a cup of tea, listening to rain tap softly on the roof. She remembered neighbors waving as they walked by, children laughing further down the lane, the sound of bicycles rolling past. None of those sounds were here now, but the feeling of them remained. She adjusted the shawl around her shoulders and took one last look down Willow Lane. The lights were on now in several houses, each one glowing quietly, like stars that had chosen to settle closer to the ground. "That's good," she murmured softly, though no one else was there to hear. Satisfied, Eleanor stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. The porch light stayed on. It always did.
A few houses down, in a second-floor bedroom, Daniel Harper sat propped against his pillows with a book resting loosely in his hands. The lamp beside his bed cast a warm pool of light across the pages, but Daniel hadn't turned one in a while. His eyes drifted instead toward the open window. The curtains moved slowly with the breeze, rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Outside, the evening air carried the faint scent of grass and leaves, clean and familiar. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime sang. Not constantly, not loudly, just one soft note at a time. Daniel exhaled and leaned back further into the pillows. He liked this part of the night best, the part where nothing needed his attention, the part where the day loosened its grip, the part where thoughts were allowed to wander without purpose. He closed the book and placed it on the bedside table. The cover made a soft sound as it touched the wood, quiet enough to feel intentional. Across the lane, he could see other windows glowing. Each one framed a small moment, a lamp, a curtain, a shadow moving slowly across a wall. Daniel found comfort in those lights. They reminded him that the world didn't disappear at night. It simply rested alongside him. He reached out and turned off his lamp. The room darkened, but not completely. Moonlight filtered through the window, soft and silver, settling across the floor. The wind chime sang once more, then fell silent. Daniel closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. His shoulders relaxed. His thoughts softened. Outside, Willow Lane continued its quiet rhythm, holding the night gently, just as it always had. Later that evening, when Willow Lane had settled even deeper into itself, a small shape moved quietly along the sidewalk. It was a cat, a gray and white cat with soft paws and unhurried steps. No collar, no rush, just the calm confidence of a creature that knew this street well. The cat paused beneath the streetlight. The light hummed gently overhead, barely noticeable, casting a warm circle onto the pavement. The cat stepped into it slowly, as if testing the space before fully entering. One paw, then another. The light touched the fur along its back, turning the gray almost silver for a moment. The cat sat. It didn't look around quickly. It didn't twitch or tense. It simply sat,
tail wrapped loosely around its paws, eyes half closed. Willow Lane didn't disturb it. The lane seemed to recognize the cat, just as the cat recognized the lane. A breeze passed through the trees again. Leaves shifted softly. The cat's ears flicked once, then relaxed. Somewhere behind one of the houses, a faucet dripped slowly. Drip. Pause. Drip. The cat listened, then lost interest. It stood again, stretching gently, front paws first, then back, each movement slow and deliberate, as if even stretching deserved its own time. Then it walked on, past Mrs. Finch's house, past the warm porch light that glowed steadily, unchanged. The cat paused again near the roses, sniffing the air. The scent of earth and petals lingered there, cooled by the night. Satisfied, it moved on. Windows glowed above the cat as it walked, some bright, some dim, some barely lit at all. Behind each window was a quiet moment unfolding, someone turning a page, someone rinsing a cup, someone drifting toward sleep. The cat did not hurry. It never did. It crossed the street slowly, paws making no sound, tail moving gently side to side, like a pendulum keeping time for the night. At the far end of Willow Lane, the cat stopped once more. It looked back, not alert, not curious, just present. Then it curled up beneath a low hedge, tucked itself into the soft darkness, and became still. The lane continued breathing. In one of the houses along Willow Lane, a kitchen light glowed softly. Not bright, not harsh, just enough. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Tick, pause, tick. A kettle rested on the stove, still warm from earlier. A single cup sat on the counter, waiting patiently. The room smelled faintly of tea and clean dishes. Someone, it didn't matter who, moved quietly through the space. Their footsteps were slow, familiar, unremarkable. They rinsed the cup. Water flowed gently, then stopped. The cup was placed upside down on a towel to dry. The counter was wiped once, then again, not because it needed it, but because the motion itself felt calming. Cabinet doors closed softly, no slamming, no rushing. The refrigerator hummed, a low, steady sound that blended into the night like distant traffic far away. Outside the window above the sink, darkness rested peacefully. The reflection of the kitchen light shimmered faintly on the glass. The person paused there, just standing, just breathing, inhaling slowly, exhaling slowly. Nothing pulled at their attention. The day was finished. The light was turned off. The kitchen fell into shadow, but not emptiness. The clock kept ticking. The refrigerator kept humming. The house continued its quiet work of resting.
By now, nearly every light on Willow Lane had dimmed. Some were off completely, their windows dark and reflective, quietly mirroring the night outside. Some remained low and gentle, not bright enough to wake anyone, just enough to soften the darkness. The streetlights held steady. They did not flicker. They did not hurry. Their warm glow stretched slowly across the pavement, laying down long, soft shadows that rested without moving. The shadows of trees leaned gently across the road, their edges blurred and unimportant. If you stood still here, or imagined standing still, you might notice how the street no longer felt separate from the houses. Everything felt connected now. The sidewalks, the trees, the roofs, the quiet windows. If you listened closely, you could sense the rhythm of Willow Lane. Not a sound exactly, more like a feeling, a shared pace, a calm agreement between everything present. A house settled slightly, wood adjusting as it cooled from the warmth of the day. The sound was so soft it barely registered, more like a suggestion than a noise. Somewhere nearby, a branch shifted its weight and became still again. Far away, not on Willow Lane itself, but beyond it, a car passed along a distant road. Its sound arrived gently, already fading by the time it reached the street, like a thought you almost remember having. Then even that was gone. The air felt thicker now, not heavy, just settled, as if the night itself had lowered its voice. The leaves on the trees barely moved anymore. When they did, it was slow and unimportant, the way fabric moves when someone breathes nearby. Willow Lane breathed in. You could almost feel it. The street seemed to expand just slightly, not outward, but inward. Then Willow Lane breathed out, long, unrushed, complete. This was not a breath that needed counting. It did not follow instructions. It simply happened. Again, the lane breathed in. Again, it breathed out. The houses followed that rhythm without effort. Inside one home, someone shifted in their sleep and then settled again, breath evening out. Inside another, a clock ticked softly, not to measure time, but to keep company with the silence. Tick, pause, tick. The sound did not demand attention. It blended into the night the way everything else did. A porch light buzzed quietly, steady and warm. A mailbox stood patiently at the curb, shadowed and still. A bicycle leaned against a fence, unmoved, unconcerned with when it would be used again. Willow Lane did not rush toward tomorrow. Tomorrow could wait. Tonight was for resting. Willow Lane breathed again, in and out. Nothing changed. Nothing needed to change. The calm did not deepen suddenly. It did not arrive all at once. It simply remained. And in remaining, it grew more familiar, more comfortable, more complete. If you were here long enough, you might stop noticing individual details. The houses would no longer feel separate. The street would no longer feel long. Everything would soften into one quiet presence. The kind that does not watch you. The kind that does not expect anything. The kind that allows you to rest without permission. Willow Lane held the night gently, the way it always had, the way it always would. And as it breathed, slow and steady, it invited everything else to do the same.
Midnight did not announce itself on Willow Lane. It did not arrive with a sound or a signal or a sudden change. It simply became the time it already felt like. The sky above the lane had deepened into its darkest blue, so dark it was almost black, yet still soft. The stars held their places quietly, scattered gently, not asking to be noticed. The moon rested higher now, its light thin and calm, spreading faint silver across rooftops and tree branches. The houses on Willow Lane were fully at rest. Their windows were dark or nearly dark. A few held the faintest glow from a nightlight or a hallway lamp left on without thought. These lights did not brighten the rooms, they only softened the shadows. Inside the houses, sleep had arrived in layers. In one room, someone slept deeply, breathing slow and even, body heavy and warm beneath blankets. In another, someone turned once, adjusted a pillow, and then settled again, sinking easily back into rest. In another, dreams had begun, not sharp or vivid, but gentle and wandering, like walking through familiar places without needing to remember why. Walls held warmth from the day, floors rested, ceilings listened. The houses were no longer doing anything at all. They were simply being. Outside, the trees stood still. Their leaves barely moved now, if at all. When they did, it was so slight it felt imagined, a soft reminder that air still existed. A single cloud drifted slowly across the moon and then moved on, unimportant and unhurried. Midnight stretched itself across Willow Lane. Time felt wider here now. Minutes did not stack on top of each other. They spread out. They loosened. Nothing waited on the other side of this hour. Nothing needed to be prepared. The lane had finished its day. It had finished its evening. Now it rested fully, without concern. If you were awake enough to notice, you might feel the weight of the night settling gently, not pressing down, but wrapping around everything like a familiar blanket. The kind that doesn't trap you, the kind that lets you sink. Willow Lane remained exactly as it was, safe, still, quiet.
There is a moment late at night when sound begins to disappear. Not all at once, not suddenly, but gradually, softly, kindly. On Willow Lane, that moment had arrived. There were no footsteps now, no doors opening, no voices drifting through the air. Even the distant sounds from beyond the neighborhood had thinned and faded, as if the rest of the world had agreed to whisper. What remained was something harder to describe. It wasn't silence, and it wasn't sound. It was space, the space between noises, the space between thoughts, the space where nothing needs to happen. A clock ticked somewhere inside a house. Tick, pause, tick. The pause felt longer than the sound. The tick itself felt gentle, almost unnecessary. A refrigerator hummed faintly, steady and low, blending into the background until it was no longer separate from the night. Far away, very far away, a train horn sounded once, long and low, already softened by distance, already dissolving before it fully arrived. Then there was nothing again. No new sound rushed in to replace it. Willow Lane did not fill the quiet. It let it remain. If you were listening, you might stop trying to identify sounds. You might stop naming them. The mind would begin to loosen its grip. Thoughts would slow, then drift, then thin. The body would respond naturally. Breathing would deepen without effort. The muscles of the face would soften. The jaw would release. The shoulders would sink just a little further. There was no instruction here, no counting, no direction, just permission. The sound of nothing held the lane gently, and in that quiet, everything felt allowed to rest. Now, Willow Lane did something it had been doing all along. It kept watch, not in a way that required attention, not in a way that asked anything of you, just quietly, steadily, as sleep began to settle fully. If you were lying down now, or imagining lying down, your body would feel heavier, not uncomfortable, just supported. The surface beneath you would seem to rise slightly, meeting you where you are. Your arms would rest without effort. Your legs would feel warm and still. Breathing would continue, slow and natural, in and out. Thoughts might still appear, but they would no longer ask to be followed. They would drift past like clouds in the night sky, soft-edged and unimportant. Nothing needed solving. Nothing needed remembering. Willow Lane remained exactly as it was. The streetlights held steady. The houses slept. The trees stood quietly. The night stretched on without concern for time. And as everything rested together, the lane, the houses, the air, your breath, sleep arrived. Not suddenly, not forcefully, but gently, like something familiar returning. Willow Lane continued without needing to be noticed. Nothing on the street waited for attention anymore. Nothing asked to be named. Nothing asked to be followed. The pavement rested exactly where it was, smooth in some places, slightly uneven in others. All of it familiar, all of it unimportant. The sidewalks stretched quietly along both sides of the lane, pale and steady beneath the streetlights. Their edges softened in the low glow, losing sharpness, losing definition, becoming less something to look at and more something that simply existed. The curbs did not separate anything now. Street and sidewalk blended together in the quiet. Mailboxes stood at the edges of driveways, their shapes simple and still. No letters waited inside them. No doors opened. No hands reached out. They were finished for the day. A fence ran alongside one yard, its wood cooled by the night air. The fence no longer remembered the warmth of sunlight or the sound of voices from earlier hours. It held its place without effort. Behind the fence, grass rested. Each blade leaned where it had settled. No wind asked it to move. No footsteps passed nearby. Nothing disturbed its shape. If you were here, really here, you might stop trying to take anything in. Your eyes would soften. Your focus would blur slightly. Details would stop asking to be noticed. The lane would no longer feel long or short. It would simply be. A porch somewhere along Willow Lane released a quiet creak as the wood adjusted to the cooler air. The sound did not echo. It did not repeat. It arrived and left without consequence. After that, there was nothing. Not silence exactly, just the absence of interruption, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, the kind that feels complete. Willow Lane did not respond. It did not need to. It remained exactly as it was. And because of that, everything else was allowed to rest.
Time moved differently now on Willow Lane. Not faster, not slower. Differently. Minutes no longer lined up in order. They no longer pushed one another forward. They softened at the edges and spread out, like light passing through fabric. The street did not mark time. The houses did not track it. Only clocks remembered, and even they did their work quietly, without urgency. Tick, pause, tick. The pause mattered more than the sound. Inside the houses, sleep had settled deeply. Breathing moved in slow, steady patterns, in and out. No one adjusted, no one shifted. Bodies rested exactly where they were meant to. Dreams, if they existed at all, drifted without story. They did not begin or end. They wandered gently, like fog moving through familiar streets without direction. Outside, the night held steady. The temperature did not change noticeably. The air remained calm. Nothing arrived to interrupt the hour. This was not an hour meant to be remembered. It was an hour meant to pass unnoticed. Willow Lane allowed it. The streetlights continued to glow, unchanged. Their light fell in the same places it had for hours, tracing the same patterns on pavement and grass. Shadows did not move. Trees did not sway. Even the sky seemed to pause. If you were listening, you might notice how your own sense of time began to fade. Thoughts would arrive less often, and when they did, they would not stay. They would pass through gently, leaving no trace. There was no need to follow them, no need to finish anything. Time had loosened its hold, and Willow Lane rested inside that looseness, content to remain there. There was nothing left to do on Willow Lane, nothing unfinished, nothing waiting. The street had settled into its final shape for the night. Houses remained still. Lights that were on stayed on. Lights that were off stayed off. No changes were required. No adjustments needed to be made. Everything was exactly where it belonged. Breathing continued everywhere, slow, even, unthinking. In rooms, in beds, in quiet sleeping bodies. Breath did not need guidance. It moved on its own, in and out. The lane did not watch. It did not listen closely. It simply remained present. A presence without awareness, a steadiness without effort. The night stretched on, wide and calm, with no edge in sight. Nothing signaled an ending. Nothing suggested a beginning. Sleep held everything gently, and Willow Lane held the sleep, without sound, without movement, without demand. The night on Willow Lane did not change. It did not move toward anything. It did not prepare for what came next. It simply stayed as it was. The street looked the same as it had moments before and hours before that. The pavement held its familiar shape. The sidewalks remained pale beneath the streetlights. The shadows stayed stretched and soft, without edges sharp enough to matter. Nothing shifted position. Nothing adjusted itself. The lane did not grow quieter because it was already quiet enough. The lane did not grow darker because darkness had already settled completely. Everything had reached its resting place. The houses remained closed and calm. Doors stayed shut. Windows stayed still. Curtains hung without movement. Inside, sleep continued uninterrupted. Breathing moved slowly through rooms, steady and even, like a tide that no longer needed watching. In and out. Beds supported resting bodies without complaint. Mattresses held weight evenly. Pillows stayed where heads had settled earlier in the night. No one turned over. No one reached out. No one stirred enough to matter. The night did not require observation. It did not need confirmation. Willow Lane had entered a state of sameness, a gentle, reliable sameness, where nothing asked to be different. Streetlights glowed in exactly the same way they had before. Their light fell on the same places, the same sections of pavement, the same patches of grass, the same quiet corners. Time no longer moved forward here. It rested alongside everything else. Minutes did not announce themselves. They passed quietly, indistinguishable from one another. If one moment slipped into the next, nothing noticed. And that was the point. This sameness made sleep deeper. The mind did not need to stay alert. There were no changes to track, no patterns to solve, no movement to follow. Everything had already been decided, not by force, but by rest. Willow Lane remained unchanged, and in remaining unchanged, it allowed sleep to stay exactly where it was.
Beneath the quiet sounds of the night, there was something deeper. Not silence, not sound. Something underneath both. A deep quiet that did not belong to any one place. It existed beneath the houses, beneath the street, beneath the air itself. On Willow Lane, that deep quiet had settled completely. The kind of quiet that does not disappear when a sound passes through it. A distant noise, if it existed at all, would float briefly, then dissolve back into the calm without leaving a mark. The quiet did not resist, it absorbed. Inside the houses, this deep quiet wrapped itself around sleeping rooms. It settled into corners. It rested beneath beds. It filled spaces without effort. Breathing continued within it, slow and steady. Heartbeats continued, calm and regular. But even these sounds did not disturb the quiet. They belonged to it. The mind no longer reached outward. Thoughts no longer formed clearly enough to matter. Images softened before they could take shape. Words faded before they could become sentences. Awareness thinned, not abruptly, gently, naturally. The body understood this depth. Muscles released without instruction. The face relaxed fully. The space behind the eyes softened. There was no boundary between inside and outside now.
no separation between body and night. Everything rested together. The deep quiet remained constant, unmoving, unchanging, and because it did not change, nothing else needed to. Sleep deepened, not by falling further, but by spreading wider, like water settling into stillness, like air becoming completely calm. Willow Lane rested inside that quiet, and the quiet held everything else.
Willow Lane continued to hold the night. Not actively, not deliberately. It simply remained. The street stayed exactly as it was. The houses stayed asleep. The lights stayed steady. Nothing signaled a change. Nothing suggested a transition. This was not a moment that led anywhere. It was a moment meant to continue. The night stretched gently, without edges, without direction. Time no longer mattered. If hours passed, they passed unnoticed. If minutes slipped away, they left no trace. Sleep remained deep and undisturbed. Bodies stayed heavy and supported. Dreams, if they appeared at all, drifted softly, without story or emotion. Outside, Willow Lane did not observe any of this. It did not monitor. It did not check. It simply stayed present, unchanged and dependable. The street had held nights like this before, many times, and it would hold many more. There was no urgency here, no need to wake, no need to move. The lane would remain even as sleep continued, even as awareness faded completely, even as the night carried on. Willow Lane would stay, quiet, still, unmoving, holding the night, holding sleep, holding everything gently.